I wanted to thank the organizers for the opportunity to be a part of this wonderful conversation we are having. We have had a fascinating day so far discussing the current status of scientific publishing. I'm going to try something different right now. I've been reworking this talk based on what we have heard earlier. I hope it works. I'm here to introduce Into the Future. I hope to weave a narrative that will help us understand why the current path of scientific communication is not sustainable and how we might craft some solutions. Solutions we will likely discuss this afternoon. Well, we can't know where we will go if we don't know where we've come from or where we are. So let's go back in time for a minute. Does anyone know why the Brits are called limeys? Right, due to the use of limes by the Navy to prevent scurvy. But I bet you didn't know how long it took the British to figure that out. Let's take a look. The age of discovery brought not only tremendous new knowledge, but also the first signs of nutritional disease. The first documented experiment to investigate this happened in 1601. Everyone on one ship out of a group of 4 ships got lemon juice. No one died. While on the other 3 ships, 110 out of almost 300 sailors were dead well before the ships reached land. Nothing was done. Almost 150 years later, the next successful experiment looked at sailors already suffering scurvy. Of the 5 treatments tried, only those getting citrus got well. It would be another 50 years, almost 200 years after the first successful experiment, before the British put limes on every vessel, and scurvy disappeared from the Navy. But it would be more than 60 years before all British ships were required to have limes. 264 years to fully engage a cure for scurvy. Now, it took so long because they didn't understand the basics of biology. And if officers had been dying, they would have been more concerned. But it was the poorly fed sailors who died. They had a lot of incorrect data fogging up these experiments. Captain Cook said sauerkraut was the way to go, and his social status set things back for a generation. The right information was not getting to the right people to permit appropriate actions. Poor scientific communication cost people their lives. The story of limes is not simply a just-so story. Rapid communication of information is important for anyone doing science. Scientists have known for well over 400 years that the work of others is critical for expanding scientific knowledge. Over the last 400 years, some of the greatest minds in history realized that openness in communication engenders a win-win process that helps many while hurting few. Especially during the last century, scientists realized that research requires rapid and open communication in order to create the knowledge needed to understand the world around us. So here we are in the 21st century, overwhelmed by an avalanche of data, drowning in a sea of information found in a multitude of locations. Is the pursuit of scientific knowledge doomed to repeat the story of limes because scientific communication cannot keep up? I think not, because the same processes that are causing such distress can also be harnessed to help us. To understand this, let's take a look at a model for why open and rapid communication produces wisdom. Modified from a proposal by Russell Ackoff, this model suggests why the open dissemination of scientific information can be so successful. Data simply exists. People interact with data to provide context, producing information. The movement and transformation of information through collaboration in a human social network results in knowledge, the ability to take an action, to make a decision. This can be to stop, to start a new line of investigation, or to gather more data. The innovation cycle again continues to crank on. By breaking complex processes into smaller parts, each can be examined by a separate analytical cycle. Now, knowledge allows us to make a decision, but that decision may not be the final or most appropriate one. Each turn of the cycle is informed by the previous ones, moving us upward towards wisdom, which is the ability to make the most appropriate decision. So the faster the cycle is cranked, the faster we enhance our knowledge and eventually make wise decisions. The analysis of each cycle can be added together into synthesis. That's required as we deal with complex systems and problems. But this is very hard for many of our current hierarchical processes to achieve. Knowledge and wisdom require rapidly turning DIKW cycles. The transformation of information into knowledge is hampered if it cannot move easily between people. A large, poorly connected network will also slow transit. But humans have inherent abilities that can foster rapid transit times in communities. However, these inherent abilities are being overwhelmed by the results of modern technology. Luckily, we can leverage our technology to overcome this. Moving into the future, any human endeavor that deals with data, information, and knowledge needs a firm understanding of how human communities organize around these factors, as well as how digital technologies will allow us to leverage this understanding in exponential ways. I'm a researcher, so I love looking at data, transforming it into information, which leads to a knowledgeable action. So let's do some transforming right now. Let's examine some data about our inherent hierarchical structures: team, tribe, and town. Now, humans may be hardwired to work best in a series of threefold hierarchies. Across the globe, the same hierarchical numbers pop up again and again. The first, 9 to 15, is the size of a cohesive team which can focus on dealing with a simple problem. It's no wonder that most of the competitive sports teams in the world are approximately this size. The next step up the hierarchy is the tribe, about 3 times larger. This is the optimal size for multifunctional groups. There's enough cohesiveness for strength, but enough diversity to deal with multiple problems. The next step, 150, is the size of the hypothetical limit for our personal understanding of where we fit in a hierarchy. I'll show just a little bit of data illustrating each number. As I said, 150 is the maximum number of a social community that we can keep in our head. Robin Dunbar showed there was a linear relationship between the size of a primate's brain and the size of their social group. Extrapolating to humans, he got about 150 plus or minus. Now, subsequent work has demonstrated the empirical power of this number, especially in the collapse of cohesive organizational structure at sizes larger than this. Now, using modern tools to examine communities, the Palo Alto Research Center can help us see the other 2 numbers by looking at the online game World of Warcraft. Here, individuals join together in guilds so they can more easily win quests, gain experience, and dominate. Park analyzed all the interactions between members in 5,500 guilds over a month. They looked at which individuals in the guild played together, how often they played together, and what was the maximum size of a cohesive group. In this example, 2 people play a lot with each other, but they form a small part of a 6-member cohesive group, the maximum subgroup. Do people join together into larger communities to support larger cohesive subgroups? The data would suggest not. There's a nice linear relationship between maximum subgroup size and increasing guild size early on. We see the maximum subgroup size plateaus at a guild size of around 50 members, with a subgroup size of about 15, the magic numbers. After this, cohesiveness becomes random. The largest cohesive groups from some very large guilds are smaller than guilds with only 12 members. Why even belong to these large guilds? No one is working with anyone else, but some guilds are as efficient as smaller ones, having groups of 50 working well together. How do they do that? Well, that's a whole nother grant proposal, but using new tools has allowed us to observe something hidden without them. Built-in hierarchies have been successful, but as we analyze increasingly complex processes, the DIKW cycle becomes hampered. Information flow slows as each level adds more people. Silos appear. Only the people at the top know what is going on, and the rest of us no longer know where we fit in the hierarchy. Openness disappears. Information has to make a huge number of jumps to move around. We end up with lines all over again. But humans have evolved a second process, informal social networks. Someone can be insignificant in the hierarchy but occupy an important part of the informal social network. With them, information can route around the damage of hierarchies and rapidly transit the organization. So let's look at how these informal social networks are put together. Networks can be regular, where you connect only to those close to you, and it takes a lot of jumps to get to anyone. They can be completely random, or they can be a mixture. These last are called small world networks. Now, in a small world network, the number of steps connecting people drops very rapidly. Say 6 billion people are evenly spread across the globe in a regular network and only connect to the 50 people closest to them. For me to connect to somebody on the opposite side of the planet, 3 billion people away, there'd have to be 60 million steps. But if just one person in 5,000 randomly connects to somebody else, the number of steps drops to 8. 1 in 3,300 drops this to 5 steps. A little bit of irregularity makes a small world network very efficient for moving information around because the transit distance of the network drops so rapidly. Now, informal human social networks are a special type of small world called scale-free. Here, a newcomer has a higher probability of connecting to someone who is already highly connected. Like high school, some people are very popular, some are not. But the chaos of high school creates something amazing. First, the average number of jumps between people in a scale-free network is not much different if there are 10, 10,000, or 10 million people in the network. Thus, the number of jumps for information to transit the network remains small, even as the network grows exponentially in size. Loss of people has little effect on the ability for people to connect with others. Information can flow almost as rapidly within a large network as a small one, and the loss of anyone is unlikely to hamper the robust flow of information. So let's look at some real data to get an idea of how we can use our understanding to enhance information flow. Here's the Twitterverse for members of Congress showing how they connect to one another. It's from several years ago for simplicity's sake, but it's obviously not a well-constructed scale-free network. Red are the GOP, blue are the Democrats. The size of a circle represents the number of connections. Now, some of the names are pretty well known in the hierarchy. John Boehner, for example. And you can see that the Democrats and Republicans have very few points where information passes between them. The most important representatives in the network, the biggest circle for each party, the ones who make sure the information flows well within and between groups, Abercrombie and Culberson, are nobodies in the scheme of the hierarchy, but they are huge when it comes to information flow. So what happens to the network if it did not contain these two individuals? Take them away, and information flow between the two groups collapses, as well as affecting flow within the group. With restricted information flow comes a restricted ability to achieve wisdom. Having information flow between major segments of an organization be dependent on just two people is nuts. If we really wanted Congress to solve complex problems, we should elect politicians who would create more robust connections to come closer to an efficient scale-free network. Now, scale-free networks seem to pop up wherever large amounts of information must be moved around rapidly and robustly. Enlarging the network by adding more people means more data can be examined to produce the information needed. The scale-free nature of a well-constructed network means that this information can be easily transformed by collaboration into knowledge. Our tools allow us to use huge social networks now. Here, for example, is my LinkedIn network, 558 people, way too many for me to possibly remember. But I can easily see that I serve as a link between several important communities, as well as see important links into different communities. Where we have come from is ever-increasing flows of scientific information. Where we are is watching huge amounts of data coupled with poorly constructed hierarchical networks hampering the creation of knowledge and wisdom. Where we are going will require us to better use the same technologies that are causing these problems. They will allow easier information flow to communities of scientists. They will also allow us to create larger scale-free social networks that work efficiently, even as we enlarge the idea of who is a scientist by engaging multiple novel communities. As primates, we have to communicate. We are social animals hardwired to transform information into knowledge and make wise decisions. We must attack the communications problems facing us by using new tools to create and enhance scientific communication processes. If we do, communicating in ways that will enhance information flow, will permit knowledge to spread, and will foster wisdom will surely come to dominate in the future. I want to thank you for listening to me today. I hope we've been able to transform some information into knowledge.